Rodney Alcala was born in 1943 in Texas, a state of wide horizons and small-town routines. Yet from an early age, his mind seemed to follow a different rhythm than those around him. His childhood was marked by restlessness and behavior that puzzled family members and neighbors alike. And as he grew older, professionals would diagnose him with antisocial personality disorder, hinting at patterns of thinking and feeling that set him apart from others. Eventually, his family relocated to Los Angeles, a city that promised opportunity, excitement, and the chance to reinvent oneself. Though for Rodney, it also became a stage where his inner conflicts quietly simmered beneath the surface. In Lodges, he navigated adolescence with a mix of charm and intensity, balancing the pressures of school, social life, and personal ambition. He enrolled at UCLA, immersing himself in the world of arts and academics, earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. The campus, full of vibrant energy and youthful curiosity, offered him an environment to cultivate skills and explore creativity. Yet it also provided cover for the more troubling aspects of his personality. Alongside his education, Rodney served in the Army, an experience that exposed him to structure, discipline, and the strains of military life, but also revealed early signs of psychological strain, including nervous breakdowns and difficulties adjusting to authority. These formative years shaped by education, military service, and a complex psychological profile laid the groundwork for the life that would follow, a life of contrast between outward sophistication and inner turmoil, between talent and troubling impulses. Each step in Rodney's early years, from Texas to Los Angeles and through the Army, contributed to a story that is both compelling and unsettling, a narrative that continues to intrigue those studying human behavior. If you want to uncover more about the intricate story of Rodney Alcala, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss any of our detailed explorations into extraordinary lives and complex histories. By the late 1970s, I had already moved through various chapters of my life, some marked by creativity, others by shadows that lingered just beyond the surface. My early years in Los Angeles had given me an appreciation for appearances and the ways people could be persuaded by charm, presentation, and confidence. It was in this environment that I found an opportunity that seemed both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. A national television appearance on The Dating Game, a show that promised fame, light-hearted entertainment, and a chance to present oneself as the ideal bachelor. On that day in September 1978, I arrived in front of the cameras dressed in a leisure suit, my long hair carefully styled, a gold chain glinting under the studio lights, and earrings that caught the reflection of the stage. The host, engaging and energetic as always, introduced me as a successful photographer, framing my story with charm and sophistication. They described my early start in the darkroom, painting a picture of a young prodigy whose artistic eye had been nurtured from the age of 13, behind the veneer of a playful television persona. However, the performance required a careful calibration. Every word, every glance, every subtle gesture had to convince the audience and the bachelorette that I was confident, approachable, and intriguing. As the questions unfolded, I presented myself with a mixture of practiced wit and a touch of bravado. When asked to describe myself, I delivered lines intended to entertain, but beneath the humor and confidence, there was a peculiar edge that some could sense. Though few truly recognized the significance at the time, I was asked to act out a scenario, to pretend to audition for a drama class in a playful, exaggerated role, and I responded with an energy that was at once theatrical and unsettling, embodying a character that skirted the boundaries of humor and discomfort. Cheryl Bradshaw, the bachelorette, played along with curiosity, and though she initially engaged with the performance, There was a hesitancy in her demeanor, a subtle recognition that the man behind the charm might not be entirely as he appeared. Backstage. Once the cameras stopped rolling and the audience's applause faded, the distinction between performance and reality became clearer. The camera had captured only a fraction of what was present in that room. The meticulous attention to manipulation, the quiet assessment of how my presence affected others, and the instinct to present myself in a way that both charmed and unsettled. The episode, later to be remembered in media accounts, highlighted a strange duality, a man capable of appearing charming, successful, and entertaining, while simultaneously carrying tendencies that foreshadowed far darker chapters. The public saw the leisure suit, the gold chain, and the practiced smile. They did not see the calculated precision that lay beneath, the attention to detail that would later play a role in crimes across cities and years. This appearance on national television stands as a peculiar and haunting intersection in my story, where the ordinary world of game shows and romantic competition collided with the underlying complexities of character and intent. It is a moment frozen in time, where the line between charm and unease, performance and reality, was evident only to those who looked closely enough to notice the dissonance, and while at the time it seemed merely a quirky footnote in a life otherwise defined by education, art, and fleeting opportunity, in retrospect it offered a glimpse into patterns of behavior and presentation that would continue to shape events in ways both fascinating and disturbing. A precursor to what would follow in the years to come. After the fleeting spotlight of television faded, life returned to its patterns. Yet beneath the surface, a darker rhythm persisted, shaping days and nights in ways that few could understand. My movements across California and New York were often deliberate, calculated with a precision that mirrored the patience and focus I had once devoted to art and photography. Each interaction, each introduction to strangers, carried an undercurrent of strategy, an instinctive assessment of opportunity and vulnerability. I learned to observe closely, to note habits and routines, to understand the subtle cues that would allow me to draw someone closer under the guise of charm, help, or shared interest, all while maintaining an outward appearance of normalcy that made suspicion unlikely. In these years, encounters that seemed ordinary to outsiders were rarely so. Luring individuals required a balance of approachability and authority, a combination that allowed trust to form quickly and convincingly. In one sit, a young girl on her way to school might be engaged with a casual offer, a small gesture that seemed innocent but had the potential to redirect her path entirely. In another, a socialite or professional woman could be drawn into conversation under the pretense of shared work, a helpful suggestion, or the common pursuit of photography or art. The mechanics of these interactions were methodical, almost rehearsed, reflecting a careful attention to timing, environment, and perception, a skill set cultivated over years of observing human behavior and refining personal presentation. Once these calculated interactions succeeded, the aftermath was equally deliberate. Evidence of control and power often manifested in posed photographs, arrangements of belongings, or objects retained as reminders, objects that encapsulated a moment or encounter, preserved in meticulous detail. Earrings, photographs, and personal items were not mere mementos but symbols of influence, fragments of stories frozen in time, each telling its own part of a narrative hidden from public view. These trophies, catalogued with care, reflected an obsessive attention to documentation, a compulsion to capture and remember aspects of each encounter long after they had passed, offering a window into patterns that, at the time, were invisible to those around me. Traveling between states, cities, and neighborhoods allowed for both freedom and anonymity, enabling sequences of events that would stretch over years and draw a mosaic of locations and circumstances into a coherent, if chilling, pattern. Each place held its own rhythm of daily life, its own unsuspecting inhabitants, and its own opportunities to navigate the delicate balance between visibility and discretion. The consistent thread through these movements was the understanding that outward appearances could conceal layers of intent, and that the public perception of one as ordinary, approachable, or even charming could coexist with behaviors that were intensely secretive, meticulously planned, and profoundly impactful on the lives of those who became unwitting participants in these encounters. Looking back, these years were a mixture of calculated movement, attention to detail, and an ability to manipulate context and circumstance, all carried out under the guise of a normal, even appealing, persona. It was a life lived in parallel worlds, one seen by the public, defined by charm, talent, and apparent normality, and another invisible yet profoundly consequential, shaped by careful observation, manipulation, and the collection of reminders of each episode that unfolded. The intersections of these two worlds created a tension that would only later become fully apparent, leaving behind a trail of stories, artifacts, and evidence that eventually revealed the depth and reach of the actions that had long been hidden beneath a surface of normalcy. Even when the law seemed close, even when the weight of prior actions pressed against the edges of exposure, I discovered that identities could be fluid, malleable, and surprisingly effective as shields. Adopting names such as John Berger or John Bergerer was more than a simple alteration. It was a careful reconstruction of presence, a reinvention that allowed me to move through cities, towns, and social spaces with a degree of invisibility that public records or casual recognition could not penetrate. These aliases were chosen deliberately, selected for their ordinariness, their ability to blend seamlessly into bureaucracies. Educational institutions, and communities where no one would question the face behind the name, and yet each offered a protective veneer, a thin but persistent layer of distance from past incidents that lingered only faintly in police reports or whispered recollections. Living under these assumed identities required constant vigilance, a mental map of the intersections between old acquaintances, law enforcement awareness, and social perception. In New York, while appearing as John Berger, I enrolled in coursework and mingled with peers who had no knowledge of the shadows trailing my real name. Classes on film and drama provided both cover and opportunity, offering structured environments in which interactions seemed perfectly natural. Yet beneath each handshake and casual conversation, there was a subtle calculation, an awareness of proximity, trust, and opportunity. Routine became both shield and tool. The mundane rhythms of work, study, and social engagement masked the deliberate orchestration of encounters, allowing the continuity of behaviors that, when examined later, formed patterns of coercion, control, and predation. Even arrests, when they came, were navigated with a mixture of composure and timing that often minimized consequences. Lenient sentences, procedural loopholes, and the imperfect systems of rehabilitation created gaps through which normalcy appeared possible, a fragile illusion that permitted movement across states, encounters with unsuspecting individuals, and the continuation of cycles that had already left indelible marks. Each return to freedom was measured, considered, and framed as an opportunity to blend in, to reestablish trust with authorities, and to maintain the outward appearances that kept the past at arm's length. Parole meetings, brief detentions, and routine questioning were opportunities to observe, learn, and adjust, reinforcing the subtle dance between compliance and evasion, visibility and concealment, that defined life under assumed identities. Traveling from city to city, shifting between California and New York, and alternating between legitimate employment and the pursuit of personal interests allowed for a complex layering of roles, each one reinforcing the credibility of the other. A camp counselor in New Hampshire could be a student in New York. A part-time photographer could be an assistant at a newspaper. Every role provided the illusion of ordinariness, a careful alignment of public perception with private continuity that made detection less likely and created a sense of control over how the world perceived movement and intention. In retrospect, the use of multiple identities was not merely survival but a strategy, a deliberate construction of navigable spaces where risk was mitigated and opportunity maximized. It was a methodical orchestration of persona, environment, and interaction, allowing life to continue in ways that, to the outside world, appeared normal or even admirable, while beneath that surface lay the continuation of patterns, behaviors, and rituals that had begun years earlier, leaving traces, artifacts, and consequences that would only later be pieced together to reveal the full scope of movement, manipulation, and impact that these assumed names had enabled across time, space, and circumstance. For years, the legal system seemed to falter around me, not out of mercy or oversight, but through the exacting technicalities that govern courtrooms. Evidentiary rules and procedural strictures, leaving earlier convictions like fragile skeletons of justice that could be dismantled and overturned with enough scrutiny and legal maneuvering. I watched as verdicts that might have sealed fates were undone, as appeals, motions, and interpretations of law chipped away at accountability, creating a space in which consequences felt intermittent and fragile, and where the rhythm of freedom, restriction, and negotiation became a complex dance dictated by statutes and interpretations rather than the clarity of fact alone. Years passed, and while the memory of my actions lingered in police reports, witness statements, and the whispered fear of those who had encountered me, the tangible force of justice seemed delayed, deferred by the meticulous machinery of courts that operate on principle as much as on evidence. Yet, the turn of technology, the relentless advance of forensic science, would reshape this landscape entirely. In 2010, the emergence of modern data analysis provided a clarity that had been impossible in earlier decades, a scientific lens capable of linking evidence to individuals with a precision that transcended the limitations of eyewitness accounts. Circumstantial testimony, or fragmented recollections, the same artifacts that had been collected, catalogued, and stored for years suddenly became incontrovertible proof, connecting bodies, belongings, and crime scenes in a chain that could not be easily broken or misinterpreted. The juxtaposition between earlier overturns and these new findings created a profound shift in the narrative of accountability. What had once been contested and uncertain was now concrete, leaving little room for ambiguity or doubt. The trials that followed were intense, emotionally charged, and meticulously documented. Prosecutors presented the data evidence alongside detailed reconstructions of events, photographs, and testimonies that connected past actions across decades. Witnesses recounted encounters, identifying patterns of behavior and the subtle manipulations that had enabled offenses to occur, illustrating a continuity of conduct that had previously been fragmented by time and legal complication. The courtrooms became arenas not only for argument and judgment, but for the painstaking assembly of a narrative that wove together decades of crime, evasion, and documentation, demonstrating how advancements in technology and investigative methods could illuminate truths that once seemed obscured or unreachable. Ultimately, the convergence of scientific evidence, legal diligence, and the accumulation of corroborated witness accounts culminated in convictions that reflected the scope and severity of past actions. The death sentence was imposed, representing the culmination of decades-long efforts to ensure that accountability matched the magnitude of consequence. In the process, the story of earlier technical reversals became a critical backdrop, highlighting the evolution of the justice system, the importance of meticulous evidence preservation, and the transformative power of technology in bridging gaps between action and responsibility. The sentence, final and absolute in its determination, was both a reckoning and a closure, a testament to the way modern methods can transform previously elusive justice into tangible resolution, ensuring that the trajectory of accountability, delayed but inevitable, ultimately aligned with the magnitude of the acts themselves. Through these developments, the narrative of evasion, manipulation, and legal challenge intersected with science, diligence, and societal determination, creating a landscape in which the past, once obscured by gaps in evidence or procedural technicalities, was finally illuminated, resulting in a verdict that brought long-awaited consequences and a stark, undeniable resolution to a story that had spanned decades. Geography, and the interplay of human ingenuity and judicial evolution. As the final chapters of this dark story unfolded, a discovery in a seemingly ordinary Seattle storage locker would cast an even longer shadow over the decades of crimes. Inside, authorities uncovered hundreds of photographs, images that captured young women and children in poses that, at first glance, might have seemed innocuous but, in the context of the investigation, became chilling evidence of a predator's obsessive patterns. These photographs were more than just reminders of individual victims. They represented a network of terror, a visual record of behaviors and acts that demanded careful and meticulous examination. Each image was catalogued, cross-referenced, and analyzed, as law enforcement sought to determine not only the identities of those already known but also to uncover possible victims whose disappearances had gone unexplained for years. The implications of the locker were profound. Investigators realized that while convictions had been secured for multiple crimes, there remained a spectrum of unknown cases, unsolved mysteries tied to this individual. Authorities reached out to the public, asking for help in identifying faces from the photographs, underscoring the collaborative nature of modern criminal investigation and the critical role communities can play in piecing together histories that predators attempt to conceal. Families were contacted, memories were revisited, and new leads emerged as the painstaking process of connecting evidence to potential victims continued. In some cases, the photographs allowed authorities to confirm that individuals once feared missing were in fact unharmed, but in others, they prompted further inquiries into unresolved deaths or disappearances, demonstrating how forensic evidence can extend far beyond the moment of collection to reveal truths long hidden. This chapter of the case also serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance, documentation, and the ever-evolving tools available to law enforcement. From DNA testing to meticulous evidence storage and public engagement, the case illustrates how patience, science, and determination converge to expose patterns of predation that might otherwise remain undetected. It emphasizes that capturing a predator often involves piecing together decades of behavior, combining physical evidence with human testimony, and remaining steadfast in the pursuit of justice, even when prior opportunities were missed or legal technicalities delayed resolution. As we reflect on this story, it is clear that while justice may sometimes arrive slowly, the combination of modern investigative methods, public awareness, and forensic diligence can ensure that accountability is eventually achieved. The Seattle storage locker, with its hundreds of photographs, stands as both a warning and a lesson. Predators may hide in plain sight, but careful observation, reporting, and evidence collection can protect future generations and bring long overdue closure to victims and their families. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story with me. If you found this account insightful and compelling, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on future deep dives into true crime stories, investigations, and the lessons we can all learn from them. Your support helps us continue sharing these important narratives, keeping the conversation alive, and highlighting the critical role of vigilance and justice in our communities.